I remember sitting with a family last year. Their mum was 102 when she passed, and they were okay with that. And that was a real honour to sit with them through that time. On the flip side, around the same time, I looked after someone who died at 2 days old, and that was tough. That was really tough.
This is Down to Earth Conversations, where we hear from ordinary people who are helping to bring a bit of heaven down to earth. Kia ora, welcome to another episode of Down to Earth Conversations with me, your host, Andy Dixon. Welcome to all those who have joined us over the last little while. I thought I'd briefly share the heart of the podcast again for some of you who haven't heard it before. This podcast is based on the belief that the way we live can and does make a difference in the world, for better or for worse. If heaven is this idea of a place filled with wholeness and goodness, peace and joy, where everyone is welcomed and finds belonging, where differences are celebrated, and we are united in our glorious variety, and if we think that sounds amazing, then why not work to create that sort of world here and now? Yes, that is a massive challenge. And no, we're not likely to get there, especially not in our lifetimes. But if we work towards it together, ordinary people doing ordinary things that bring goodness and beauty and wholeness and hope, then we help to bring a bit of heaven here on earth in the midst of all that is painful or chaotic or divisive or just plain evil, undoing in whatever small way we can injustice, oppression, discrimination, poverty, and all else we see that is wrong with the world. It's not about pretending the hard stuff isn't there. It's about working in the midst of it all to bring whatever bit of heaven we can into the present. Today's guest, Nick Allwright, does just that. Nick is a funeral director. It is his job to walk alongside grieving family and friends as they deal with the loss of their loved one. As we will hear from Nick, sometimes this is a glorious time, and sometimes it is anything but. Sometimes it is a celebration, and sometimes it is a symbol of all that is wrong with the world. Nick and I talk about how he got into the profession, what is involved in his role, how he interacts with families, how he looks after himself while dealing with death every day, what he loves about the role, and what makes it sometimes a very difficult job to do. What I found fascinating in this conversation was the realization that while Nick deals with death, his job is very much about the living, helping them through what can be a very tough time in their lives, doing whatever he can to let them get on with their grieving without having to stress about the details that he can take care of. Please note that, as we are talking about death, there may be triggering aspects of this kōrero, so please hit pause and have a breather if you need to, and access the relevant support networks if something comes up for you. You will hear in Nick's voice that this is, at times, a very emotional conversation. It's very real and authentic, and it's a conversation that, for me, is a beautiful example of someone stepping into the pain and sorrow of others and bringing a bit of heaven in the midst of it. This is episode 74 of Down to Earth Conversations. Here's Nick Allwright. Nick, it's great to have you. Kia ora, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Andy. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Yeah. So, nō hia koe, who are you? Tell us a bit about Nick Allwright.
I'm Nick. I'm 34, married to Kimberly. I've got 2 kids, Laura, who's 7, and Taylor, who's 4. I'm originally from...
4 already?
Yeah, he's 4.
Jeez.
Crikey, yeah. Originally from Lower Hutt, but have lived all through New Zealand, from Rangiora to Kawerau to Stratford and Taranaki, and then now here in Christchurch.
I didn't know you were from Lower Hutt. I thought, our connection was in Taranaki, so
Yeah.
I kind of just assumed that's where you were from.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
Oh, nice. And you're a funeral director.
I'm a funeral director, yeah.
Which, the reason I invited you on the podcast is because, I wonder how many people know what funeral directors actually do. And the more, like when we've talked about it, I found it really eye-opening about all the different facets of it. So, yeah, I mean, I was thinking about it. I don't know many kids going, I want to be a funeral director when I grow up. So, how did you land in this line of work?
Yeah, and
what was that journey?
Yeah, I'd never considered it, and any thought of it, growing up, that didn't exist. So I got into it coming up 5 years now. I was working in another job, and it wasn't taking me anywhere, and needed something, needed a change. But I was really particular with what I wanted to do, and I wanted to serve people, I wanted to help people, and I didn't know what that looked like. And so I applied for a lot of jobs. I could have quite easily gone and driven a forklift for 10, 12 hours a day, got paid reasonable money, but I didn't find any satisfaction in that.
I've done that, and it was a nice 3-month sabbatical.
Yeah.
But no more.
And so I was I was applying for a lot of jobs, but none of them really set well. Then I came across an ad on Trade Me for a funeral director's job, and I looked at the description, and I thought, yeah, that's quite cool, working with people in a hard time in their life. And so I applied for that job and never heard back from them.
Right.
Spoke to a guy who I went to church with, who's a funeral director, who's actually my colleague now. He sits next to me in the office, and he goes, "Yeah, you're not going to get that job." I was like, "Oh, why is that?" And he goes, "Oh, it's a funeral company run by women, and they only employ women." I was like, "Oh, okay,
good to know."
Yeah, it's good to know. Obviously, they couldn't advertise it that way.
Yeah.
And he said, "Are you interested in this sort of work?" And I thought, I think I might be. So he went and had a conversation with the manager at John Ryan Funeral Directors in Christchurch, and they just happened to have a few jobs coming up, and so I went in for an initial meeting and chat with them, and really thought that that's something I could do, and then got the job, and it's been in development ever since.
Yeah. And is it something that you just literally learn on the job? Or there's no qualification or anything for it?
There is a qualification, and I'm currently halfway through it.
Right.
It's a diploma in funeral directing through the Polytech, and that's been another journey and a half. It's part-time, all online, on top of working the job, which has been a bit of a struggle. Some weeks working on call, we can work horrendous hours, and then to find time to study and do assignments, and find time to live life outside of the work, and be a dad, and be present for family stuff it can be fairly tiring and fairly difficult.
Yeah, I mean, because you don't get to decide when people die.
No.
So
no, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, crazy. Many of our listeners will have engaged a funeral director at some stage, but there'll be others like me who, like, I've never been involved in organising a funeral or anything like that. So for those of us who haven't had that experience, what is actually involved in your role?
Yeah. All starts with a first call where a family member will give us a call and engage our services. From there we go to wherever the person has passed away, and transfer them into our care using a stretcher, much like an ambulance stretcher. And then from there we then arrange to meet with the family and go over what their wishes are, whether they want a funeral service, whether they want cremation or burial, and then everything to do with that, the legal paperwork that goes through births, deaths and marriages, and then the relevant paperwork for cremation or burial and whatever. We look after people that don't want services whatsoever, through to people who want a full funeral service in a chapel or a church or anywhere else, and then full range of everything.
And so do you actually then lead the funeral? Or?
No. So I just arrange everything and present on the day, and then either a celebrant or a minister or a family member will look after the service side of things.
So kind of like a wedding planner, but for funerals.
Yeah, and work in a much shorter time frame.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I've arranged funerals for the next day after someone's passed, and be it mildly stressful on our part, it's possible, but our usual is a week or so.
So I imagine that a number of your clients are first timers.
Yeah.
I mean the family family
are.
members, not the dead person. Oh gosh. I imagine a number of the family members are first timers in terms of engaging your services. So, like, how do you guide them through that whole process? Is there just like written stuff that they can read through, or do you actually physically meet with them? How does it all work?
Yeah, we physically meet with them and go through what their requests are. Normally in our first phone call we do talk about do you have what was mum or dad's wishes, sort of thing, and then go from there, and then if they need help with decisions, we can guide through all the options available, and go from there. Yeah,
I imagine it doesn't always run smoothly with all the emotions and the relational frictions that are involved in family life. Is that part of what you do, is actually working to try and help the family or friends or whoever it is get on the same page?
Yeah, for sure. Families are very complex, and they can become even more complex in a tough situation where there's a lot of grief, a lot of sadness, sometimes anger, and sometimes it can bring people together, and sometimes it does the complete opposite. So yeah, trying to work through family dynamics can be a challenge, but my aim in life is to be as relaxed as possible, and guide everyone in the best way possible to remember their loved one.
Yeah. So I mean, as I'm thinking of all the different things you're saying, I'm hearing pastor, mediator, event organizer, grief counsellor to some degree, administration. There's a whole range of stuff that you're doing. And like you say, often for and with people who are in the worst moments of their life.
Yeah.
Does that take a toll on you personally? Like, what's the pressure of that like for you?
Yeah, it does. Sometimes it's okay.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's I see it as a real honour to be a part of the funeral and organising it and working with the families. Sometimes it's really difficult. I've looked after a number of situations which have really tested me and a few times broken me. Quite a few times now. And yeah, it's been a journey working through that grief. We see a vast array of how do I word that? We see grief in so many different ways. Sometimes it can be very intense, and that can be difficult to manage and work with. And sometimes people are completely blank and show no emotion or expression, and that can also be quite interesting to work and deal with. How do I manage it? I try to. I try to leave as much work at the door before I walk inside at home. I've found that is necessary to live a good life with good work-life balance. But sometimes there are times where that's impossible to shake, and I notice my energy is completely drained. I wouldn't say I'm not horrendous to be around, but I also don't want to be around people. And my wife's very understanding and knows when I've had a bad day, and yeah. But I find relief in music.
Yep.
And I'm playing a brass band that I rehearse with twice a week, so that's a good out.
Yeah.
They know that the work I do, and that I just come along for the enjoyment of playing music and whatnot, and yeah.
Nice. Humour?
Yeah. Yeah.
Thinking about, I've interviewed doctors and paramedics and stuff,
Yeah.
and there always seems to be humour in these roles that have the intense pressure. Is that a big part of
For sure.
how you guys cope?
Yeah. I'd say I've got fairly dark humour, but you kind of need something to make it through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you had moments where things just have not gone to plan? Has there been any of those kind of catastrophes?
No, thankfully, because they're the most stressful things.
Yeah.
I've almost had a premature interment of a casket, where a family almost dropped the casket into the grave without it lowering. That was stressful.
Yeah, I bet.
The celebrant saw it coming and turned away. Bless her. But generally, no, I do whatever I can to ensure that nothing goes wrong as such.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you don't need a heap grief on grief.
No, exactly. And that's that's my role, is to make everything as smooth and try and take all the stress away from the family, so they can grieve and not have to worry about everything on top of that. That's my job, to facilitate the funeral on their behalf, and make it as stress free as possible.
I often thought about that sort of thing when Bex was making wedding cakes.
Yeah.
And I would be the delivery person on the Saturday morning often, and like carrying this very heavy cake that normally if I was carrying something that heavy, I'd lean it against my body, but you're not leaning a cake. So you've got this thing out in front of you, your forearms are kind of dying. You're out at some random vineyard that doesn't have nicely paved concrete, and going, if I drop this thing, it's going to ruin someone's day. Yeah. And so, just having those moments of, actually, this is someone's really special time. I need to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to make sure that it stays that.
Yeah.
We actually even had a time where we got the dates wrong, but the venue rang us up and was like, when are you bringing the cake? And we went into full-blown panic mode. Yep. But between us and the venue, we managed to get it all sorted, and the wedding party had no idea. So that was as close as we got. But it's one of those things, I guess, where there's a perception that the funeral is for the dead person. But I guess hearing how much of what you're talking about is with the family, it's like actually the funeral is about the dead person, but is for the living. Yeah,
absolutely.
Is that how you experience it?
Yep. And that's a lot of discussions that I have with families where someone's passed away and their wishes was to not have a funeral. And like, that's cool, go for gold, but do something to remember them. Go out, go to the pub for a drink or whatever, go out for a meal as a family, host your own memorial gathering or something like that. Do something to remember the person who's passed, not just organise a cremation or a burial and no one's there, and then you just carry on with life. That's not the healthiest way to live. And I find most people are very receptive of that, and funerals can be on the expensive side of life as well. And that's a challenge that we face on the daily. but trying to do whatever we can to help a family remember their loved one in any way, shape, or form is what we're there for and what we do.
Yeah. My family actually learnt that the hard way.
Yeah.
My granddad, who we're just coming up to 10 years since he died, and he didn't want a funeral.
Yeah.
He was, when I'm gone, that's the end.
Yeah.
Nothing, so just carry on with life.
Yep.
Which was good for him, but he wasn't there, was he?
Yeah.
And that was up in Auckland, and I'd actually literally just moved to Christchurch the week before from Auckland. And so my mum and her siblings went up to help my grandma with sorting out bank accounts and, the practicalities of what happens when someone's passed on. And so they had a week of reminiscing and telling stories and being together and had a great time. And it wasn't until 8 months down the track that my auntie realised that her kids had not had a chance to process, and neither had we, and it was awful. And so she organised a tree planting to commemorate after 1 year.
Yep.
And so we all went up to Auckland and had this tree planting, and that was the first time I cried, because I actually got to process it. I got to be around people that I loved, remembering someone I loved.
Yep.
And so, I think that's huge advice is actually do something.
Yeah.
Even if a funeral's not it, because it's not everyone's cup of tea.
No. No, and I met a lot of people that they just say to me, "I just put me in a box and burn me," and that's cool, but what about everyone else, sort of thing? And I definitely find it very important just to have something. And the other thing I find very beneficial is pre-planning funerals as well. And a lot of people like to do that to take the weight off the family, and that's a really enjoyable time sitting with people and saying, how do you want to be remembered, and then having those discussions around with those people that don't want anything is how will your family best remember you, or and that sort of opens doors, and by I'm not a salesman by any way, shape or form. In fact, I'm a very poor one, because I don't want to charge people lots of money for something they don't necessarily want. I try and be a fairly decent person.
So you wouldn't sell many cars?
Heck no, no. I'd be the guy trying to cut 20-30% off the price just to ensure people can afford to buy it or something. But sitting with people and working out what they want. That's really special. Sometimes that can be really, really fun and really enjoyable. Sometimes it can be a bit depressing too, because for me, as the funeral director, the next time I see them, they won't be alive, and that can be really weird. Yeah. But it's still an honour to be part of that journey as well.
Do you think that the weirdness of it partly comes from the way our culture has treated death? That you look at, I look at Māori culture, for example. They just have a much more robust way of looking at life and death and grieving and that kind of thing than our Western ways of, or even the fact that we ship our old people off to old folks' homes so we don't have to care for them. Or, there's positives around the hospital care and those kind of things. But is that kind of something that you see in your role, that we just don't have a good grasp on death?
I see it within myself.
Right. So,
I talk to people and asking whether they want to be buried or cremated, and whatever their choices. And I said, for me, neither is a good option, because I don't really want to die. To me, that doesn't sound like a good thing at the moment. And so even myself, I don't think about my own ending or my own death, because I don't want to think about it. And so it's probably not the healthiest thing. And in my study, in looking at various different cultures and how they embrace death and various rituals and things like that. It's been really fascinating and quite eye-opening, but it still hasn't changed my thoughts on it just yet.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's fascinating, even like being around so much death.
Yeah.
Could take you down the path of like reshaping your whole perspective. But I guess there is that level of disconnect that you need to try and keep, isn't there?
Absolutely.
So that's probably a big part of that too.
Yeah.
Of compartmentalizing so that your life isn't overwhelmed.
Yeah.
What do your kids think? Do they know what you do? Do they?
My daughter does.
Yeah.
As of about 3 or 4 months ago.
Right.
Up until then, all she's known is that I help people in my job.
Right.
And that's it. Because it's not something we talk about at home. You know?
Yeah.
How was my day? Well, I looked after this person and this person, this person. It's not really a great conversation to have with young kids.
But I helped some people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's a great conversation to have
Yeah,
with kids.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, and so it was only up until a few months ago we were driving to ballet, and she was asking me about my day, and I thought now's probably a good time to tell her what I do, and I explained it in the way. So my grandfather died a couple of years ago, and I helped work on his funeral.
Wow.
And just drove the hearse and things like that. And I explained to her, that's when I drove the car for Pop, I do that every day with other families and whatnot, and a bit more. Yeah.
How did she take that?
Yeah, she's quite mature for a 7-year-old,
Yeah.
and she took it reasonably well. We still don't talk about what I do on the regular, but she knows what I do now, and And as for Taylor, he'll find out one day.
Yeah, totally. What are your hopes in terms of when you're engaging with a family? What is it that you hope to leave with them, or what's the best outcome for you, I guess?
Best outcome is that they're happy with the service we've provided, that they see that we've done whatever we can to make the journey a smooth one, and whether that be for example, last night I left work at 5:30, drove to the other side of town to deliver some ashes to someone, so they had their loved one as soon as possible, and given that sort of really good level of service, and making things as easy and stress free as possible. That's probably the big one, is taking away that stress that can accumulate in a quite a tense situation. And I approach things reasonably calmly. I'm a reasonably calm-mannered person, and I don't change who I am when I meet with families. Sometimes I'm not calm on the inside. When we're working to a very quick timeline, or a lot of things to organise and prepare for, but the family don't need to see that. Those behind the scenes things again, that you're dealing with that, so they don't have to. And I always just try and find some form of connection or relation to the family, just to establish the rapport, and get to know them, and understand their journey, and how their relationship was with their loved one, and work with that. Sometimes I've met with families that are completely estranged and have had nothing to do with their loved one, but felt the need to be present in that final time. And then families who extremely close, and it's a massive loss for them when the matriarch or the patriarch of the family has passed away, and it's a really big deal in the family, and it's a massive loss for them. Regardless of if they're in 100 or in their 90s and lived a really good life, and their time has come to an end.
Is it different for you in situations where someone's like an old person who's died naturally, or those kind of things, versus the tragedy of losing someone young?
Yeah.
How does that affect your involvement, or what is that like? Because it just sounds really challenging to me.
Yeah, it is. I really enjoy, looking after someone who's reached the end of their life as someone in their late 80s, 90s, into their hundreds. That's cool. That's really cool. I remember sitting with a family last year, probably in the first third of last year. Their mum was 102 when she passed, and they were okay with that.
Yeah.
Because they said, mum's old, and we've been expecting this for some time, and we're just stoked with the time we've had with her.
Yeah.
And the kids they would have been in their late 60s, 70s sort of thing. So, in my eyes, as a 34-year-old, they're starting to get a wee bit older themselves. But, to get, a mum who's 102, awesome. And that was a real honour to sit with them through that time and, just do what I needed to do to help them. On the flip side, around the same time, I looked after someone who died at 2 days old. And that was tough.
Yeah.
That was really tough. And whatever the reason that baby passed away, that's a life cut way too short.
Yeah.
And that's it's not easy to deal with. And when you got your own kids, you can't help but think of how lucky I am to have them. And then also at the same time, probably becoming a bit more protective of them as well, because I wouldn't want to, walk that journey, and I wouldn't wish that upon anyone, because that's tough. It's really tough stuff. Yeah. And then tragedies as well. People losing their life to vehicle accidents, or people who have chosen to end their life. They can be quite challenging. Yeah. Very challenging sometimes. Yeah.
What sort of support do you have to be able to do that role? There are, counselling professionals that have huge training to work with people in those situations, but not only do you not have a whole counselling degree, but also you're dealing with them then and there, and with a time frame.
Yeah.
Is that something that you've just learned on the job? How do I get through this? Or is there, do you have people you can go download to and just offload some of your stuff? Or
yes and no. I meet up with an old pastor friend every now and then, and that's just helpful just to offload a wee bit. My parents are both former ministers, so especially my father is very, very helpful sometimes to give him a call and have a chat to him about things. Apart from that, I've learnt that I can't hold on to family's grief. It's not my job to grieve for them. Sometimes that's impossible, and sometimes as I said, I do take that on. But I need to let it go as quickly as I can. And there have been times where I have gone to a counsellor to say, I've looked after, for example, in a time frame of about 5 weeks, 4 people under 40, 2 of them newborn. One was a 4-year-old who was smack bang in the middle of my 2 kids' age.
Yep.
And then a couple of people in their late 20s and then 40s, and within a quite a small time frame, that was a lot to deal with,
Yeah.
and broke me quite well, to the point where I felt that I needed to talk to someone.
Yeah.
Which I thought, looking back on that now, and talking to the counsellor, one of those was enough.
Yeah.
Let alone
yeah,
six.
totally.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I've gone to see another counsellor since then as well, just to continue processing and to try and look after myself better. Because sometimes, we put on a pretty brave face, but sometimes the circumstances are hell. And we see things, we see families going through hell, and it's a hard journey to be on with a family.
Yeah.
For sure, yeah.
And I mean, the listeners can probably hear it in your voice, but I can see this is quite emotional, even just talking about this.
Yep.
So do really appreciate that. What is on the flip side of that? What are the highlights of your job? What are the things you really love about it?
I really love sitting down with families, and I love that personal connection, and just being on that journey with people, and you get to know them in a very short time frame, and that's all I wanted to do. Is when I was looking for this job, I wanted something with purpose. I wanted to work with people, and I wanted to help them, and this is what I've wanted to do, and I'm doing it, and most of the time I love it. Some of the time it's a different story. But just being able to walk alongside people is such an honour and such a blessing for me to be able to do on the regular.
Yeah. Again, it's that sort of thing where no one necessarily grows up wanting to do this role, and yet it's such an important role. Just thinking through all the stuff that you do and imagining if that wasn't there, if that support wasn't there for whānau, it would be horrendous. And I mean, traditionally, maybe
it's what they used to do.
It was dealt with within but then we also had a more knitted community, than our disconnectedness that we have today. So, I mean, it's just a hugely important role, and thank you for giving time to share about it today. Thank you for all you do for families, for people who have lost people, for easing some of the grieving process, or at least taking the stress out of it so they can grieve about what they need to grieve about. Thank you for what you're doing to bring a bit of heaven down to earth.
Thanks, Andy.
Hello, hello heaven. Will I hear you whisper to come near?
What a powerful kōrero. Before meeting Nick, I'd never really thought about what funeral directors do. But after hearing his story and what his role entails, I am so glad there are people like Nick who do this amazing work, taking the stress out of what is often a very sad time, helping families grieve well, remember their loved one well, and be able to look back on a fitting celebration that honoured the one who had died. Nick, thank you for who you are and for what you do. Here is a blessing for you. Nick, as you step into the mourning of others on a daily basis, may your life be filled with joy as you help them to carry the weight of what they are facing, and as you help them celebrate the person they have lost. May you find a lightness and a grace in the midst of the heaviness of death, allowing you to do what you do without it weighing you down. As you support others in what they are going through, may you too find people around you supporting you and being there for you, just as you are there for others. May you always know that this work you do makes a massive difference for those you support, even if they don't realise quite how much different it would be without you. May your family continue to flourish, And may you continue to find ways to let go of the grief of others so it doesn't affect your own family relationships. As your children come to understand more of what you do, may they be really proud to have a dad who helps people in such profound ways. And lastly, may you know you are seen, you are heard, and you are loved. Thanks to Strawn for the music and Rangi for the karakia. Join me next time when I speak to teenage artist and business owner Amelie Coggin, founder of Little Joys by Amelie, a business working to help those with mental health challenges. We talk about why Amelie started the business, how it has changed over these first few years, how her personal journey affected the direction of the business, and where she sees it all going. It's another powerful and heartfelt conversation. Until then, me inoi tātou.
E tō mātou matua I te rangi, kia tapu tō ingoa, kia tau mai tō rangatiratanga, kia mea te tau e pai ai ki runga ki te whenua, kia rite anō ki tō te rangi. Homai kia mātou ai nei, he taro mā mātou mō tēnei rā. Muro mātou hara, me mātou hoki e muru nei I o te hunga, e hara ana kia mātou. Aua hoki mātou e kawea, kia whakawaia, engari whakaorangi a mātou I te kino. Amen.